In 1843, 26 cadets reported to the South Carolina Military Academy campus on Meeting Street, here in Charleston, South Carolina, which later became known as the Citadel. Among this inaugural group was a young man named Col Tew. 3 years later, in 1846, Cadet Tew ranked at the top of his class academically, making him the first honored graduate and thus the first to receive a diploma in Citadel history. Later, he served as the first president of the Citadel Alumni Association. After graduation, Lieutenant Tew took a position as a professor at the Citadel until 1852, when he traveled to Europe to study military tactics. In 1857, now Captain Tew returned to South Carolina, relocating to another military academy, the Arsenal in Columbia, South Carolina, where he served as superintendent. The cadets at this institution honored him with a sword in November 1858. The inscription reads, "The cadets of the Arsenal Academy, to Captain C.C. Tew, November 25th, 1858. The following year, he founded his own military academy in Hillsborough, North Carolina. During the Civil War, Colonel Tew, a well-respected military tactician, served with the 2nd North Carolina State Troops for several campaigns. He lost his life at the Battle of Antietam in Maryland on September 17, 1862, exactly 153 years ago yesterday. Colonel Tew was mortally wounded on the road known as the Bloody Lane, with his sword clutched firmly in his hands. He was only 34 years old. He left behind his wife and 3 children. There are conflicting stories of Colonel Tew's fate and that of his sword, scabbard, cup, and watch. With no recovery of his body or possessions, his family searched earnestly for information. His father, Henry, even traveled to Key West, Florida, with hopes of finding his son alive. Accepting that Colonel Tew had perished in Antietam, generations of the family continued their search for the sword and other cherished items. In 1885, Colonel John Finn, a veteran of the 8th Ohio Unit, wrote to Colonel Tew's daughter. He shared with her the specifics of the battle on the Bloody Lane, her father's fatal injury, and the fact that his unit had taken his sword. Colonel Finn promised to return the sword, but that never occurred. The journey of the sword from 1863 to 1963, a 100-year span, is unclear. The hypothesis is that an officer in the 55th Ohio Volunteer Regiment, Captain Franklin Sauter, took possession of the sword. He died at Chancellorsville in 1863, and his battle souvenirs were shipped home. Thus, these treasures became family heirlooms. In 1916, a descendant, Mary Sauter Blythe, gave birth to a daughter, Amelia, who in her adult years immigrated to Canada. Records show that in 1963, she then donated the sword along with other memorabilia to the then 763rd Communications Regiment, now the 33 Signal Regiment. Her intent was to provide a safeguard for valued family treasures. The sword hung in the mess at Wallace House in Ottawa until 2009, when the unit was relocated. During the inventory of the property being displaced, the historical significance of the sword was discovered, and it was placed in the E.J.G. Holland BC Armory. For the next 6 years, leaders of the 33 Signal Regiment and Foundation have worked tirelessly to bring the sword to the Citadel. In March of this year, Colonel Tew's family and the Citadel were notified of the intent of the 33 Signal Regiment and Foundation, thus ending a long journey and seemingly endless search for this cherished relic. Just a few days ago, the Canadian Chief of Defense determined that rather than be on loan, the sword will become property of the Citadel. Colonel Tew's family graciously agreed and have joined us today. So it is today, 157 years after the cadets of the Arsenal presented a ceremonial sword to Colonel Charles C. Tew, the first valedictorian graduate of the Citadel, a highly respected citizen, scholar, military officer, husband, and father. The sword comes to his alma mater. We welcome the Canadian delegation who has worked earnestly to make this day a reality. Honorary Colonel Glenn Miller, Coordinator of Support, 33 Signal Foundation, Mr. Mike Martin of the 33 Signal Foundation, and Lieutenant Colonel Douglas Swinton, Commander, 33 Signal Regiment, who will make the presentation. Receiving the sword on behalf of the South Carolina Corps of Cadets is Cadet Colonel Jimmy Irvin, the regimental commander, who passes it to Lieutenant General John Rosa, president of the college. Lieutenant General Rosa accepts the sword with Colonel Tew's great-great-granddaughter, Miss Caroline Sloan. The sword, along with other memorabilia, will be placed in Daniel Library.